Chapter 1. The brass tumblers of the iron safe clicked into place. It was a sharp, unforgiving sound in the dead silence of the cavernous bedroom. Leora held her breath. Her hands, clad in worn leather gloves, trembled violently against the cold metal dial. A searing pain erupted across the left side of her face. The venomous ink-black veins of Vesperine's curse pulsed beneath her skin. The dark magic acted as a cruel reminder of the ticking clock placed upon her very existence. The agony was a living, breathing fire. She needed the bloodstone. Only the ancient crimson relic locked inside this very vault could pacify the agonizing burn threatening to consume her mind. She twisted the final lock. The heavy iron door groaned, surrendering an inch. Before Leora could reach inside, a sudden hiss of steam shattered the quiet. The towering oak door of the ensuite bathroom swung open. Leora froze. Her blood turned to ice. A thick cloud of white steam rolled out from the doorway, carrying the metallic tang of fresh copper and the sharp, earthy scent of a rain-swept pine forest. Through the mist, a silhouette emerged. Stellan stepped into the dim light of the bedchamber. He was a colossal figure of lethal, untamed grace. Water cascaded down the imposing battle-hardened plains of his chest. Deep, jagged scars crisscrossed his torso, telling silent, brutal tales of 100 wars won in blood. A simple white towel hung precariously low on his narrow hips, doing nothing to diminish the raw, primal magnetism radiating from him. He had just returned from a violent skirmish at the borders. Dark, unruly hair clung to his forehead, dripping a mixture of warm water and the residual blood of his enemies onto the dark stone floor. The sheer physical presence of the Alpha King struck Leora like a physical blow. Her lungs forgot how to pull in air. Click. A mechanical snap echoed behind her. Violet, luminescent runes flared to life along the frame of the main bedroom door. The magical wards had sensed the disturbance. The room sealed itself. There was no handle to turn. There was no window to shatter. She was trapped, locked in a gilded cage with the most terrifying, merciless predator in the entire realm. Leora's chest heaved. Her heart hammered a frantic, deafening rhythm against her ribcage. Her right hand slipped beneath her dark cloak, her fingers wrapping desperately around the hilt of a silver-coated dagger. Her left hand flew up to her face. She frantically adjusted the thick black veil draped over her head. She had to conceal the grotesque, fractured lines marring her cheek. If he saw the dark magic tainting her, he would not just kill her. He would be entirely disgusted by her. She pressed her back against the iron safe. She braced for the inevitable roar. She waited for the crushing, leaden weight of his killing intent to snap her spine. But the roar never came. Stellan stopped dead in his tracks. The lethal, icy aura surrounding him suddenly faltered. His broad shoulders went completely rigid. His nostrils flared. He drew in a slow, deep, deliberate breath. Beneath the harsh copper stench of his own battles, another aroma lingered in the damp air. It was faint at first, then overwhelmingly potent. Freesia. Sweet, delicate, intoxicating freesia, woven intricately with the grounding, earthy warmth of cedarwood. Inside Stellan's mind, the walls of his ironclad control shattered. His wolf clawed relentlessly at the mental barriers. It howled, feral and entirely consumed by an instinct older than time itself. Mate. The beast demanded absolute possession. It demanded to drag the source of that exquisite fragrance into the darkest corner of the den and never let her leave. Stellan's hands curled into tight fists at his sides. The muscles of his forearms corded with the immense effort of holding his beast back. He slowly turned his head. His gaze locked onto the small, trembling figure crouched by his stolen vault. "You are incredibly foolish." His voice was a low, dark rumble. It bypassed her ears entirely, vibrating through the stone floor and settling deep within the marrow of Leora's bones. Before she could even blink, the empty space between them vanished. He moved as a lethal blur, faster than the human eye could track. A terrifying force slammed Leora against the freezing stone wall beside the safe. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. The silver dagger slipped from her numb fingers, clattering uselessly to the floor. She was instantly caged. Stellan pressed his immense frame against hers, trapping her utterly. The biting chill of the stone wall at her back violently clashed with the incandescent heat radiating from his damp, bare chest. His large, calloused hand snapped up. Leora flinched, squeezing her eyes shut. She waited for the crushing blow. Instead, his rough fingers caught the delicate edge of her dark veil. With one swift, merciless pull, he tore the fabric away. The veil fluttered to the ground like a broken raven's wing. Leora kept her eyes tightly shut. Her breathing turned erratic. She waited for the gasp of revulsion. She braced for his disgust at the venomous black curse marking her skin. A searing, suffocating heat pressed closer. "Look at me," he commanded. The order left no room for defiance. Trembling, Leora opened her eyes. Stellan was staring down at her. He was close enough that she could feel the chaotic, rapid thrum of his heartbeat echoing her own. But he was not looking at her with horror. His irises had bled away from their usual stormy, calculating gray. They were now a blazing, incandescent alpha red. His glowing gaze traced the dark, cursed veins on her cheek. There was no disgust in his expression. There was only a ravenous, predatory hunger that made Leora's blood ignite. He leaned in closer. His nose brushed the shell of her ear, inhaling deeply at her pulse point. The scorching heat of his breath sent a violent shiver cascading down her spine. "Did you come here to steal my things?" he growled. The vibration was a dark, possessive purr vibrating against her sensitive neck. "Or did you come here to offer your life, my little fiancé?" Simultaneously, a deafening shriek pierced the quiet of the night. The castle's perimeter alarms erupted into a frantic mechanical wail. The outside world had finally realized a thief was inside the walls, completely unaware that the thief was already caught in the jaws of the wolf. Chapter 2. The shrieking alarms outside tore through the night sky. The mechanical wail signaled a total breach of the fortress. Yet inside the dim bedchamber, time simply stopped. Stellan did not flinch. He did not pull away from the delicate, trembling woman, pinned beneath his imposing shadow. His glowing crimson eyes remained entirely fixated on Leora. The chaotic noise of 100 armed guards mobilizing in the courtyard meant absolutely nothing to his wolf. The only sound that mattered was the erratic, frantic fluttering of Leora's heartbeat. Intruder located in the Alpha's wing. A muffled shout echoed through the thick oak door. Heavy boots pounded against the stone corridor. Leora gasped, reality crashing over her. The executioners were here. She twisted her wrists, trying in vain to break free from his iron grip. Her silver-coated dagger lay useless on the floor. She was utterly defenseless. "Let me go," she whispered. Her voice was a fragile, fractured sound. "They will kill me." A dark, dangerous rumble vibrated deep within Stellan's chest. The sound was an ancient promise of violence. "No one touches what is mine." He turned his head slightly toward the sealed door. "Override," he commanded. His voice carried an absolute, unquestionable authority. Total lockdown. lethal force authorized for anyone who breaches this threshold. The glowing violet runes lining the doorframe instantly flared into a blinding, violent crimson. The magical locking mechanism snapped shut with a definitive ringing strike. He had not locked her in to punish her. He had locked the entire world out to protect her. Leora stared at him in profound shock. The absolute tyrant of the realm, the ruthless Alpha King, was actively shielding a cursed thief from his own army. A sharp, frantic knock echoed against the reinforced wood. "Alpha," a voice yelled from the hallway. "We have a perimeter breach. Are you secure?" Stellan sighed, the lethal red fading slightly from his irises as annoyance replaced his feral instinct. He stepped back just an inch, allowing Leora a desperate gasp of air, but his hand remained firmly planted on the wall beside her head, keeping her securely trapped within his personal space. "Enter alone, Orson," Stellan called out. The crimson runes parted just enough to allow a single signature through. The door cracked open. Beta Orson burst into the room, a silver broadsword clutched tightly in his right hand. He looked ready to slaughter 100 rogue wolves. However, the terrifying image of the lethal second-in-command was entirely ruined by his attire. Orson was wearing a dusty pink apron, heavily smeared with white flour and a dash of vanilla extract. "I was in the middle of a very delicate sponge cake," Orson began, his chest heaving. The guard said. Orson stopped dead, his jaw practically unhinged. He stared at his alpha. Stellan was dripping wet, half naked, and pinning a small cloaked woman against the iron safe. Orson's gaze dropped to the discarded silver dagger, then back up to the dark, venomous veins marring Leora's pale cheek. Silence stretched across the room. It was thick and suffocating. "Put the sword away, Orson," Stellan ordered smoothly, "and summon Eudora." "Eudora, the healer." Orson blinked, lowering his weapon slowly. He wiped a streak of flour from his forehead. "Alpha, with all due respect, that is an assassin. She is holding a silver weapon in your private sanctum." "She is not an assassin," Stellan corrected. His gaze drifted back down to Leora. He inhaled deeply, letting the intoxicating scent of freesia and cedarwood settle his raging beast. "She is a terrible thief with a very interesting secret. Fetch the witch." Orson bowed his head, muttering under his breath about ruined cakes and impossible alphas, before slipping back out the door. Once they were alone, the crushing romantic tension returned. Stellan finally stepped back, crossing his arms over his broad chest. The movement flexed the intricate tapestry of scars across his skin. "Pick it up," he gestured to the fallen veil. Leora scrambled down. Her fingers hastily snatched the dark fabric. She moved to drape it back over her head, desperate to hide the ugly, rotting curse from his piercing stare. "Stop!" His command cracked like a whip in the quiet room. Leora froze, the veil hovering just inches from her face. "If you cover your face in my presence again, I will burn that fabric to ashes," Stellan warned. His tone was not angry. It was intensely, undeniably possessive. He closed the distance between them with slow, deliberate strides. He reached out, his calloused fingertips lightly grazing her unblemished jawline. The physical contact sent a jolt of pure electricity straight to Leora's core. "You will remain in these chambers," Stellan stated, his thumb brushing her lower lip. "You are my personal prisoner now. I will monitor every breath you take." It was a gilded cage. Leora knew she should run. She knew she should fight. But the blistering heat radiating from his touch melted her resolve. For the first time in her cursed life, she did not feel like a monster. She felt deeply, dangerously desired. The heavy door creaked open again. Eudora, the ancient medical witch of the pack, shuffled into the room. She carried a leather bag smelling faintly of dried sage and potent wolfsbane. "I am entirely too old to be dragged out of bed for a domestic dispute, Stellan," the old witch grumbled. She adjusted her spectacles, her sharp eyes landing on Leora. "Well, well, what do we have here?" "Examine her," Stellan ordered, stepping back reluctantly. He stood entirely too close, his muscles coiled tight, ready to strike if the witch caused Leora an ounce of pain. Eudora approached. She hummed thoughtfully as she inspected the black, venomous lines spreading across Leora's skin. "Dark magic. Old magic," she muttered. "Can you heal it?" Stellan demanded. "Patience, boy," Eudora snapped. She reached out, extending a glowing green fingertip toward Leora's cheek. The moment the witch's magic made contact with Leora's skin, a deafening crack echoed through the room. A violent, explosive shockwave of pure kinetic energy blasted outward. Eudora was thrown backward, crashing hard against a heavy oak wardrobe. The magical recoil shattered the glass lamps resting on the bedside tables. Stellan roared. He moved instinctively, throwing his massive body over Leora to shield her from the flying debris. Beneath him, Leora gasped. The sudden surge of magic had unbalanced her. She stumbled backward, her hand slamming down hard onto the surface of the open iron safe to catch her fall. Her bare palm pressed directly against the cold, jagged surface of the bloodstone. The ancient relic instantly reacted. It did not glow with its usual dull, bloody red. Instead, the stone erupted in a blinding, incandescent silver light. The brilliant illumination flooded the dark room, casting sharp, beautiful shadows across the stone walls. The silver energy pulsed rhythmically. Thump, thump, thump. It was beating in perfect unison with Leora's racing heart. Across the room, Eudora groaned. She pushed herself up off the floor, wiping a metallic drop of blood from her bottom lip. Her ancient eyes were wide with absolute, unadulterated terror. "Great Mother," Eudora wheezed, her trembling finger pointing directly at Leora. The silver light from the stone was now crawling up Leora's arm, intertwining with the black curse. "That mark, that scar, is no curse of vanity." Stellan turned, his fangs descending as he shielded his mate from the blinding light. "Speak plainly, witch." "It is a lock," Eudora whispered, her voice cracking with awe and dread. "A seal, holding back an ancient catastrophic entity." Chapter 3. The stench of sulfur and rotting marigolds preceded the messenger. He stood in the center of the obsidian throne room, dripping dark ash onto the pristine marble floor. Vesperine's emissary was a creature of nightmares, cloaked in shadows that seemed to swallow the morning light entirely. In his skeletal hand he held a black parchment, an ultimatum. Stellan lounged on his throne of carved bone and iron. He looked utterly bored, though the lethal twitch of his jaw betrayed the violent beast pacing beneath his skin. Leora watched from the concealed balcony above. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The silver light of the bloodstone had faded, but the revelation of the seal still echoed deep within her bones. The messenger's voice was like grinding stones. "The dark witch Vesperine demands the immediate return of her stolen property. Hand over the scarred girl. If you refuse, the onyx crown will drown in abyssal hellfire by tomorrow's twilight." Silence fell over the great hall. The tension was thick, suffocating, and completely leaden. Stellan did not blink. He slowly stood up. He descended the dais with the terrifying, silent grace of an apex predator stalking its prey. He snatched the black parchment from the emissary's hand. He did not read it. He crushed it into a tight ball. In a flash of raw power, his alpha heat incinerated the cursed paper into a pile of fine gray dust. "Tell your master something for me," Stellan rumbled. His voice was deathly calm. Before the creature could draw a breath, silver flashed. Stellan's claws elongated, slicing through the air with devastating precision. A sickening thud echoed through the silent hall. The messenger's right arm hit the floor, severing cleanly at the shoulder. Black, viscous ichor sprayed across the polished marble. The creature shrieked, collapsing to its knees in agony. "Tell her," Stellan continued, casually stepping over the writhing creature, "that if she ever refers to my mate as property again, I will personally tear her throat out with my teeth. Get out of my territory." In the far corner of the room, Eudora casually blew on a steaming ceramic cup. "Chamomile and valerian root," the old witch muttered to Beta Orson, who was furiously scrubbing flour off his chainmail armor. "Excellent for blood pressure. The alpha really needs to watch his temper before he gives himself an aneurysm." Up on the balcony, Leora felt physically sick. He had just declared war, a brutal, catastrophic war against a supreme dark force, all to harbor a broken, cursed thief. She touched the jagged black veins on her cheek. The dark magic pulsed against her fingertips. She was a plague. She was a lock holding back an unknown disaster. She could not let an entire pack burn for her. When midnight draped the castle in absolute darkness, Leora made her move. She slipped out of the gilded bedroom. She wore only a simple linen dress and a heavy wool cloak to fight the biting cold. She moved like a phantom through the labyrinthine corridors. The stone beneath her bare feet was freezing. The castle was eerily quiet. Only the distant crackle of wall torches disturbed the absolute silence. She reached the eastern archway leading to the dense, unforgiving woods. Freedom was just 100 yards away. Sacrifice was the only logical choice to save the man who had inexplicably claimed her. A sharp, metallic scrape shattered the quiet. "Did you honestly believe you could leave?" Leora froze. The air around her instantly dropped 10 degrees. The overwhelming, intoxicating scent of rain-swept pine and raw ozone enveloped her completely. Stellan stepped out from the impenetrable shadows of a stone pillar. He was a colossal, immovable wall of muscle and lethal intent. His chest rose and fell in a slow, calculated rhythm. He wore no shirt, seemingly impervious to the biting winter draft. The intricate scars on his torso gleamed pale silver in the moonlight. "I have to go," Leora whispered. Her voice trembled, cracking under the crushing weight of his presence. "Vesperine will slaughter your people. I am not worth a war, Stellan. I am just a blind spot in her grand design." Stellan stalked toward her. His footsteps were completely silent, yet the ground seemed to shake with every stride. "You do not get to decide your worth. I am cursed," she pleaded, taking a desperate step backward. "Eudora said it herself. I am a walking catastrophe. Let me go before the hellfire reaches your gates." He closed the distance between them in a single heartbeat. He did not touch her, but his sheer proximity felt like a physical restraint. The heat rolling off his skin was a furnace against her shivering frame. "There is no hellfire hot enough to make me surrender what is mine." Leora's back hit the cold, unyielding stone of the archway. She was trapped again, but this time the danger was not a locked door. It was the feral, possessive monster, blazing to life in his eyes. His irises bled from storm gray to a terrifying, incandescent alpha red. "You belong to me," he growled. The vibration of his voice settled deep in her lower belly, sparking a treacherous, forbidden heat. "Every breath you take, every frantic beat of your heart, it is mine to protect. mine to keep. I refuse to be your ruin, Leora challenged, her chin tilted up in an act of sheer, foolish defiance. She pushed against his solid, immovable chest. It was like pushing against a mountain. I am walking out those gates. Stellan's control finally snapped. He lunged, his large, calloused hand wrapped around the nape of her neck, securing her in a vice-like grip. He tilted her head to the side, fully exposing the fragile, pulsing line of her throat. The intoxicating aroma of freesia and deep distress spiked in the cold air, driving his wolf into an absolute frenzy. If you take one more step toward that forest, Stellan breathed against her collarbone, his hot breath sending electric shocks down her spine. I will claim you right here. I will mark you so deeply that the entire world will smell my scent on your blood. Leora gasped. Her pulse hammered frantically against his lips. She should have been terrified. She should have fought with everything she had. But the overwhelming primal need in his voice triggered a deep, answering ache within her very soul. The feral mating instinct demanded surrender. She looked up into his glowing red eyes. Her chest heaved. Then she took one deliberate, defiant step backward. A low, guttural snarl ripped from Stellan's throat. There was no hesitation. There was no mercy. He slammed her against the stone archway, his mouth descending with brutal, possessive precision. His razor-sharp alpha fangs pierced the delicate skin of her scent gland, sinking deep into her flesh. Chapter 4. The fangs sank deep. The pain was not a sharp, agonizing slice. It was an absolute, blinding explosion of white-hot lightning. Stellan's pure, undiluted alpha venom flooded Leora's veins. It was a torrential river of liquid fire mixed with the biting chill of a winter storm. She arched her back, a fractured gasp tearing from her throat. The mating bond violently snapped into place with the devastating force of a falling star. Her hands flew up, her fingers tangling desperately in his damp, dark hair. She did not push him away. The feral, dormant instinct buried deep within her soul roared to life, demanding absolute surrender. She pulled him closer, her heartbeat synchronizing perfectly with the terrifying, rapid thrum of his chest. Mine, Stellan growled against her skin. The vibration sent a shock of pure ecstasy straight to her core. But the venom did not stop at her pulse point. It raced upward, drawn magnetically to the venomous black veins marring her face. Inside Leora's bloodstream, a brutal, catastrophic war ignited. The Alpha's life force collided violently with Vesperine's ancient dark magic. The inky curse resisted fiercely. It clawed at her flesh, attempting to suffocate the invading power. The collision of these two primal forces turned her body into a blinding crucible. The agony was colossal, yet beneath the searing pain a terrifying electric power began to unfurl from the darkest corners of her mind. The lock was breaking. It did not break quietly. It erupted. A deafening concussive shockwave of pure, incandescent silver magic blasted outward from Leora's small frame. The kinetic force was absolutely devastating. It ripped through the heavy stone archway, instantly turning centuries-old masonry into fine, suffocating dust. The violet magical runes protecting the corridor shattered like cheap glass. The shockwave expanded outward in a blinding flash of starlight, obliterating the entire west wing of the fortress. Somewhere in the crumbling, smoking ruins, Beta Orson let out a tragic, soul-crushing wail. His prized, hidden collection of rare, imported merino yarn was currently incinerating into a pile of sparkling ash. Stellan moved on pure instinct. He tore his fangs from her neck and spun around, wrapping his colossal frame entirely around Leora. He became an impenetrable shield of muscle and bone, absorbing the lethal impact of falling debris and shattered timber. When the deafening roar of the destruction finally ceased, an eerie, ringing silence fell over the ruined castle. Stellan slowly pulled back. He ignored the bleeding cuts on his broad shoulders. His glowing crimson eyes scanned her frantically, searching for injuries. Leora opened her eyes. The oppressive leaden weight that had anchored her soul for a decade was completely gone. She touched her cheek. The grotesque, rotting lines of the curse had dissolved into nothingness. Her skin was flawless. It radiated a breathtaking, ethereal warmth. In the exact place where the darkest magic had festered, a stunning, luminescent constellation of silver stars now glowed softly against her cheekbone. She was not a monster. She was magnificent. Stellan stared at her, his breath catching in his throat. The ruthless, terrifying Alpha King looked completely undone. Then her bones began to sing. The dormant beast inside Leora, chained and starved by the curse, violently tore its way to the surface. She did not shift with the horrific, bone-breaking agony of a normal werewolf. The transformation was an ascension. Her physical form dissolved into pure, blinding light, forcing Stellan to shield his eyes. When the brilliant illumination finally receded, a wolf stood amid the rubble of the West Wing. But it was not a creature of coarse fur and earthly muscle. Leora had transformed into a towering, ethereal stargazer wolf. She was a myth breathed into reality. Her coat was woven from the fabric of the midnight sky, glittering fiercely with the brilliance of 1,000 trapped galaxies. Her eyes were pools of liquid starlight. She radiated an aura of power so immense, so ancient, that the surrounding guards who had rushed to the scene instantly fell to their knees in involuntary submission. She was a creature of divine magnitude, a species thought to be hunted to extinction 10 millennia ago. A stargazer was the ultimate amplifier. Her mere presence could turn an alpha into a living god. Leora tilted her majestic, shimmering head back toward the broken ceiling. A howl ripped from her throat. It was not a physical sound. It was a column of pure, concentrated stellar energy. A blinding beam of silver light shot upward, violently piercing the heavy, storm-laden clouds and splitting the night sky entirely in two. It was a beautiful, catastrophic beacon. The sheer magical output sent a shockwave across the entire continent. Half a world away, deep within a fortress of obsidian and bone, the Supreme Witch King snapped his ancient, rotting eyes open. He smiled, a grotesque twisting of decaying flesh. The beacon had been lit. He had finally found her. Chapter 5. The blinding starlight finally faded into a soft, dying ember. The colossal toll of the first transformation sent Leora plummeting back into her fragile human form. Her bones felt like molten lead. The world spun wildly out of focus. Before her knees could strike the ruined stone floor, powerful arms caught her. Stellan lifted her effortlessly. He carried her away from the smoking wreckage, stalking past his stunned guards and a quietly weeping Orson, straight into an untouched chamber in the East Wing. He laid her upon a vast silk-draped bed. The mattress was incredibly soft beneath her aching spine. Leora kept her eyes closed, utterly exhausted, yet she felt entirely safe. The intoxicating, grounding scent of rain-swept pine and raw ozone wrapped around her like a physical blanket. A moment later, the mattress dipped. Stellan sat beside her. He held a warm, damp linen cloth. The ruthless Alpha King, a warlord who commanded thousands with absolute indifference, now knelt beside a thief. His touch was painstakingly gentle. He carefully wiped the thick soot and debris from her face. His calloused thumbs reverently traced the faint glowing constellation, now permanently etched into her cheekbone. "You hid this from the world," he murmured. His voice was a dark, rumbling caress that vibrated straight through her chest. Leora opened her eyes. The stormy gray of his irises had darkened into the ravenous, molten gold of a fully bonded mate. "I thought I was a monster," she whispered. "Vesperine made me believe I was a plague. Vesperine is a coward." Stellan leaned closer. The blistering heat of his bare chest radiated against her chilled skin. "She locked your power away because she was terrified of what you are, a stargazer, a queen meant to stand above them all." He pressed his lips to her forehead, then trailed down to the raw, pulsing mating mark on her neck. Leora gasped. The sudden friction sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity straight to her core. The pain was completely gone, replaced by a deep, feral ache that demanded to be soothed. She reached up, her trembling fingers tangling in his dark hair. She pulled him down. The kiss was not a brutal clash of dominance like before. It was a profound, soul-deep surrender. Stellan worshipped her mouth, his hands mapping the delicate curves of her body with possessive reverence. The crushing, romantic tension that had suffocated them finally broke, washing over them in a tidal wave of blistering heat and undeniable claiming. They moved together in the quiet shadows of the room. The mating bond flared brilliantly between them, weaving their souls into an unbreakable, luminous tether. In his arms, Leora was no longer a victim. She was powerful. She was entirely his. Hours later, Leora lay tangled in the heavy silk sheets, her head resting over his fiercely beating heart. Peace finally settled over her weary mind. Then, the bedrock of the castle violently shook. The shrieking perimeter alarms ripped through the tranquil silence. The protective magical wards surrounding the east wing did not simply fail, they were utterly, violently obliterated. A suffocating stench of rotting marigolds and sulfur flooded the bedchamber. The solid oak door exploded inward, splintering into 1,000 lethal projectiles. Stellan roared. He lunged off the bed, placing himself directly between Leora and the shattered doorway. His claws elongated instantly. But the enemy was not a physical army. A thick, gelatinous cloud of abyssal black smoke surged into the room. It moved with terrifying, impossible speed. The shadow slammed directly into Stellan's imposing chest. The sheer force lifted his colossal frame off the floor, pinning him brutally against the far stone wall. Stellan snarled, clawing at the smoke, but his fingers passed right through it. The dark entity acted as a venomous parasite. It immediately began siphoning the potent golden alpha life force right out of his veins. The suffocating grip tightened around his throat, choking the breath from his lungs. Through the swirling toxic miasma, a tall figure stepped elegantly into the ruined bedroom. Vesperine wore a gown woven from nightmare silk. Her eyes were pitch-black voids. She looked at the gasping Alpha King with utter disdain, then shifted her terrifying gaze to Leora, who was clutching the silk sheets to her chest. The Dark Witch smiled a wicked, hollow smile. "Hand over the stargazer's heart right now, you little rat," Vesperine cackled, her voice echoing with the stolen power of the Supreme Witch King, "or sit there and watch your precious Alpha die before your very eyes." Chapter 6. Vesperine's hollow, mocking laughter echoed off the fractured stone walls. The suffocating stench of rotting marigolds intensified. It clawed at the back of Leora's throat. Against the far wall, Stellan let out a low, guttural choke. The venomous black smoke coiled tighter around his throat. His colossal frame convulsed. The golden potent alpha life force was literally being bled from his veins. 10 years ago, Leora would have cowered. 10 years ago, she would have surrendered to the dark magic. But she was no longer a cursed, shivering thief. She was a stargazer. Leora let the silk sheets fall to the floor. She did not bother to cover her bare skin. She stood tall in the center of the ruined bedchamber. The ambient temperature in the room instantly spiked. The faint, silver constellation on her cheekbone ignited, burning with the blinding intensity of a newborn sun. "You made a terrible mistake, stepmother," Leora whispered. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. It did not shake. It resonated with an ancient, overlapping echo of 1,000 celestial beings. She stepped forward. Vesperine stopped laughing. Leora did not look at the dark witch. She locked her glowing silver eyes entirely on her mate. Through the unbreakable, luminous tether forged by his bite, she felt his agony. She felt his fading heartbeat, but she also felt the cavernous, empty space within his soul waiting to be filled. She reached out her hand. "Take it," Leora commanded through the bond. "Take everything I have, my king." A shock wave of pure, incandescent kinetic energy erupted from Leora's chest. It shot across the room like a bolt of silver lightning. The power struck Stellan directly in the heart. The effect was instantaneous and absolutely devastating. The stargazer magic acted as an unimaginable amplifier. It hit the dying embers of Stellan's alpha blood and poured 1 billion gallons of raw, volatile fuel onto the fire. Stellan's eyes snapped open. They were no longer the furious crimson of an earthly alpha. They were blazing pools of liquid stardust. A roar tore from his throat. It was a sound so immensely powerful it shattered the remaining stained glass windows in the entire eastern wing. The sonic boom physically threw Vesperine backward. The dark parasitic smoke choking him was instantly incinerated into harmless white ash. Stellan did not just break free. He ascended, his human form violently blurred. Bone and muscle shifted with terrifying, explosive speed. There was no pain in this transformation. There was only absolute, divine wrath. A colossal wolf landed firmly on the ruined stone floor. He was towering, easily the size of a formidable warhorse. His coat was not dark. It was woven from blinding, shimmering starlight. He was an apex predator elevated to a living deity. Vesperine scrambled up from the floor. Absolute, unadulterated terror finally cracked her arrogant facade. She raised her hands, desperately summoning a wave of abyssal hellfire. The black flames roared toward the towering beast. Stellan did not even dodge. He opened his powerful jaws and snapped his teeth. The kinetic force of his bite alone snuffed out the hellfire entirely. He lunged. It was not a battle. It was a flawless execution. The starlight wolf slammed into the dark witch with the unstoppable momentum of a falling meteor. Vesperine shrieked as the blinding, purifying light of his aura scorched her corrupted flesh. Stellan pinned her to the ground with one colossal glowing paw. Leora walked slowly toward them. The air crackled with raw ozone. The lingering stench of sulfur was entirely erased by the intoxicating, sweet aroma of freesia. She looked down at the pathetic, burning creature that had tormented her entire life. "The onyx crown does not bow to shadows," Leora stated coldly. Stellan's jaws clamped down. A blinding flash of silver energy consumed the room. When the light faded, Vesperine was gone. Only a pile of fine gray dust remained on the scorched rug. The deafening silence returned. Stellan slowly turned toward Leora. The colossal beast lowered his towering head, his glowing eyes entirely devoid of wrath. He nudged his cold, wet nose gently against her stomach. A low, Rumbling purr vibrated through his colossal chest, seeking comfort after the storm. Leora sank to her knees, burying her hands in his thick, shimmering fur. She pressed her face into his neck, breathing in the scent of rain and victory. Hours later, the sun finally crested over the horizon. The golden morning light spilled into the courtyard of the fortress. The castle was heavily damaged, but the pack had survived. The demonic army waiting at the borders had instantly dissolved into ash the moment Vesperine died. Down in the kitchens, a very soot-covered Beta Orson was carefully pulling a baking sheet from the surviving brick oven. He held up a perfectly round, flawlessly smooth pink macaron. He shed a single tear of pure joy. Out in the courtyard, the entire Onyx Crown pack was gathered. Thousands of wolves stood in absolute reverent silence. Stellan stepped out onto the grand stone balcony. He was back in his human form, wearing only a pair of dark trousers. The intricate battle scars on his chest gleamed in the morning sun. He held Leora tightly against his side. She wore a stunning gown of deep crimson silk. Her face was completely unhidden. There were no dark veins. There was only a faint, breathtakingly beautiful constellation tattooed into her pale skin. Stellan looked out at his people. Then, he did something the ruthless Alpha King had never done in the history of his reign. He turned, dropped to one knee, and kissed the back of Leora's hand. He stood up and effortlessly lifted her into his arms, holding her high for the entire pack to witness. "Behold your stargazer," Stellan's voice rolled across the courtyard, carrying absolute, unquestionable authority. "Behold the supreme Luna of the Onyx Crown." Below them, thousands of wolves dropped to their knees, bowing their heads to the thief who had stolen the Alpha's heart and saved their world.